Okay, and we're live. Welcome everybody to today's Kubernetes office hours. It is September 19th, 2018. This is the first of two sessions. We have another one in about 6 hours to catch the rest of the United States. So what is this? This is a live stream where we answer your user questions concerning Kubernetes. How do I use Kubernetes? How do I set up Kubernetes? How do I configure Kubernetes? All that is fair play. You can find us in #office-hours on Slack. And we'll be keeping an eye on Kubernetes-users as well if you run out of questions. And check the topic for the URL for all the event information. Before we begin, let's introduce ourselves real quick. Bob, kick it off.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I'm with the University of Michigan. My sort of specialty is bare metal deployments, multi-cluster federation type stuff, networking, and all the things in between.
Hi, I'm Joel Speed. I work for Pusher. I spend a lot of time at the moment in the Kube Builder channel. So if you've been in there, you've probably seen me chatting around. I've done a lot of stuff around auth and spent a lot of time in API machinery as well. So sort of generic questions around those topics.
I'm Nico. I work at Xing as a Kubernetes freelancer. I'm also on the bug triage team for the SIG release 112 and 113. And generic questions, Kubernetes related, anything, yeah.
Hi, I'm Stefan.
Hey, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Stefan Prodan. I work for Weaveworks. I'm part of the developer experience team. I work mostly with Kubernetes, integrating continuous deployment tools, GitOps, and all the good stuff. Go, Igor.
Hey everyone, my name is Ihor Dvorotsky. I'm a developer educator at CNCF at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and I'm also one of their co-leads of product management SIG PM. I'm happy to answer your questions about Kubernetes in general, about the Kubernetes product strategy and roadmap.
All right, and I'm George Castro. I work at Heptio as a community manager, and I'm kind of the co-host here with Bob, and I'm streaming, and I work as part of SIG Contributor Experience, so I kind of have my hand in everything. So the way this is going to work, let's get some ground rules here. So first of all, feel free to keep asking your questions in the #office-hours channel. You don't have to wait, just post it in there. And what we do, we have a link there to the HackMD document. That's where we'll keep notes and stuff. We'll put your questions in there so we organize them, answer them in order, that kind of thing. And then at the end, we're going to have a raffle. And if we ask your question online, you have a chance to win the highly coveted Kubernetes t-shirt. Not this one, the other Kubernetes t-shirt. We continue to fail to actually wear the t-shirt that we give away during the show. So quick ground rules here. Judgment-free zone. So if you're in the channel and you see people asking what seem like basic questions, that's literally why we're here. So make sure you're following the Kubernetes code of conduct and treating everyone professionally, because there is no one expert. So that's part of the reason that we have this show, is to give everyone a safe space where they can not get judged, and then just helping them at work getting their stuff set up. We will do our best to answer your questions. However, please understand we don't have SSH access to your cluster. Distributed systems are complicated, so we might not be able to give you the specific answer you want, but at a bare minimum, either send you to the right SIG to get more information, or perhaps give you the right piece of docs or the right information that you need to troubleshoot. So we'll do the best we can. But yeah, we can't like SSH into your control plane and figure out why your kubelet's broken. Panelists, you're encouraged to expound on your answers given your expertise. So it's not just about giving someone the docs. It's also about sharing any knowledge that you might have on any implementation that you might done in production. So please do that. So please post your questions in the channel. We also have a thread on discuss.kubernetes.io, which I will post. If you have any written up question or a Stack Overflow link that you've pre-written or something, feel free to plop those in there, and we will get to them. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, and paying it forward. So if we answer one of your questions, or if you're seeing any value out of us doing it, we always love getting tons of feedback. Even if we helped you on the littlest thing, it really helps us out, because we keep a running tag on that, and then we use that to help make the show better. At some point, we keep saying we're going to do this. I would like to have topical ones where it's like, here's an entire office hours on just storage, just things like that. But we need feedback from you, the audience, on what's working for you and what isn't. Each session is recorded and available on YouTube. There's a playlist there in the Kubernetes channel. We have an entire backlog of information going back almost a year now, I think. So there's a ton of expertise there. So you're welcome to browse that. And lastly, if you want to sit on this panel, these are all volunteers. So if you've had a experience deploying Kubernetes and feel like you want to share, the commitment is 1 hour a month, which is not that bad. And even then, you don't have to show up every month. We usually get enough volunteers to show up and fill the panel. So if you're feeling like paying it forward, you can always do that. We're also always looking for marketing help, so help us spread the word, and make sure you hang out towards the end is when we do the raffle. So let's begin. Let's kick on over to the HackMD notes and see what the first question is. Am I just going in order here, top to bottom? All right. First question comes from Aaron in the Office Hours channel. Welcome, Aaron. Says, we're currently operating a kubeadmin cluster with one master at the moment, and we need to migrate the one master machine to a new machine as it's running on a machine with very poor resources. Is it possible? Any advice on how to do it? Eventually, we're going to migrate to using multi-master, but we don't really have the infrastructure for it at the moment. So migration of the control plane, I guess, from a single node to multiple nodes.
I can have a stab. So I haven't used kubeadm just as a proviso, so I'm not entirely sure on that, but sort of generic Kubernetes, if you want to do this, if you've got one master, I'm guessing it's got etcd on that master node, you're going to need to bring up another node and join those two etcds together. Now, there's obviously documentation on the etcd website for that. That's quite dangerous, though, because then you've got two, and so if you get a split brain, like, you're just going to be in a bit of a sort of difficult place. So try and make sure you migrate those quickly. But if you do join the etcds, then the API server on the new node and the API server on the old node will be serving the same data, so that's perfectly safe. The controller manager and the scheduler should, in theory, do the leader election, so that should also be safe. So the main thing there is actually just migrating the etcd data. So yeah, I think bring up a new node, join the two etcds, and then remove the old etcd, which should shut down the etcd service on the old machine. At that point, you can turn off that node and everything should just migrate over.
Yeah, if you don't actually mind downing the master services for a bit, like, you should be able to lift and shift as long as, like, these certs and all that match up.
So the TLDR here isn't really a live migration. What you're doing is adding and then removing, right? Which seems to be.
Yeah, you'll want to make sure that all the signing keys as well. So the service accounts, for instance, have signing keys. You need to make sure that those match across the machines and that the certificates are valid. I think, yeah, the signing key is the most important one.
Yeah. If you copy over all the directories, it shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah.
So Aaron, hope that answers your question. Feel free to stick it around and ask some follow-ups and details. I'm almost feeling bummer for not checking the latest kubeadmin releases as far as how this works, because I'm pretty sure you could just add two more, right? Provision two machines, add two more, wait, and then mark the one that you want to get rid of as bad.
It might be interesting to check the heptio-arc tool that is about backup and restore.
Mm-hmm.
So you could back up all the etcd data and the resources from the first cluster and restore them in the second, in the new cluster, the new machine.
So I do have a follow-up because I feel like a natural question here. Aaron, I'm going to ask a follow-up for you here. Running etcd and the control plane on the same machines, like at what size do you get to the point where you have to have like dedicated etcd machines? Or do most people just, the control plane is the control plane?
In our environment, we have separate etcd autoscaling groups. So we tend to have 5 etcd nodes in each of our environments. they manage their own stuff. If we want to replace an individual node there, we can just kill that. It's just got etcd on. We've actually got a script that came from Monsanto or something like that. That means that you can just kill the node, and when it comes back up, it fixes all the missing stuff, like removes the old node, joins itself to the cluster. So that's quite cool. And then, yeah, the control plane, the Kubernetes like scheduler, API server, controller manager. We haven't seen the need for more than sort of 2 of these in any of our clusters so far. We're running them on C4 Large on AWS, and they just seem to cope with sort of 40 nodes. So, yeah.
Also, kubelet is pretty resilient, so you can actually close the old master, start up the new master, restore it at CD, and I don't know, 2 minutes of downtime should not do anything wrong to your cluster, even if you have operators and all that. They should keep retrying, and things should work out of the box. So
to add to that, I have seen problems. I have seen problems with things like the Nginx Ingress controller before, where if they do lose access to the API server, they just like the configuration goes nuts and you lose your ingress completely. This happened to us in production a while ago, so hit and miss on that.
That's a bummer, because I have been told that, you know, the specific design was if a control plane ever goes down, the cluster's supposed to just go into cruise control, right? Like just keep on.
Yeah, but that's not a cluster problem, right? It's the Nginx controller that's going insane. It's not the cluster. So
yeah, which is funny because like, yeah, my cluster's fine. It doesn't matter. My service is down. But
yeah.
All right. Anything else to add about the control plane? All right. Thanks, Aaron. Feel free to continue to ask questions. Next up, we have Messam. Hope I pronounced that right. Welcome to Office Hours. Says, how can I configure Kubernetes masters to forward audit logging on an internal service or a machine within an AWS VPC?
This is probably possible through FluentD or any log forwarding tooling that can be configured to do so.
Joel seems to be nodding in agreement.
Yeah, we've got FluentD running as a daemon set on all of our nodes, and we've got a separate configuration for the master nodes that just picks up the audit logs. So that can be done, and then we forward off to Elasticsearch, sort of standard ELK stack.
Bob, you look like you were nodding as well.
Yep, that's honestly what I end up doing.
Okay, so it seems like everyone likes FluentD, which released 2.0 into GA yesterday. So congratulations to those folks. Hopefully that answers your questions, Messam. Feel free to ask a follow-up. Eve C, welcome back. I remember you from a previous Office Hours asked, this might be more of a GCP/GKE question, but does anyone know which GKE permission, if any, controls a user's access to create a certain CRD resource that falls under certain APIs? I'm guessing container.customResourceDefinitions.create allows users to create custom resource definition objects, but I'm after controlling permissions to create, e.g. API version cert manager.k.io/v1alpha1 kind : cluster issuer. Do you all see the question? Because I'm totally butchering that YAML. Yeah. Any opinions on this one?
I don't know the GCP permissions that well, but you should be able to hop into like the Google channel. I forget which what it is.
#GKE.
Yeah.
Now would be a good time to mention that the major cloud providers do have channels on the Kubernetes Slack where you can deal with provider-specific issues. But is that the best answer we have?
So cert manager requires a special RBAC. It will not work by default. Even if you create the CRD, you still need to install the controller. So you will be needing administrative rights on GKE to apply cert manager RBAC definition. I should do that as an admin. So I give myself an admin role on GKE. You create the cert manager RBAC, and afterwards you can remove that admin role by for yourself.
The way I've interpreted that question is that they want to restrict it so they can only create certain named custom resources, which I know is not a feature in generic RBAC in Kubernetes. So I think GKE have a separate authorizer. It might be a feature in there, but in generic Kubernetes RBAC, you can't restrict creates to individual named resources because the API scheme doesn't allow for it.
If you can create a custom resource definition, you can create whatever other custom resource definition, that's for sure.
Okay, and then he has this follow-up. Is this possible just with GCP IAM policies, or do I need to do some stuff to create RBAC in the cluster and link to GCP IAM accounts? All right, so we don't know this one. So hopefully Hash GKE can help you out, and I will try on the, when we get the West Coast ones, hopefully we'll get some Googlers in here that might be able to help you out. So that seems to be the best answer. Real quick before we move on, when Messam was talking about configuring Kubernetes masters to forward audit login to an internal service, he goes, I was referring to the webhook backend mentioned here in the docs/debug application cluster/audit webhook backend, but the documentation does not mention how to configure the forwarding properly. My use case is that I need it forwarded to an internal service that checks for certain events to send them to a Slack channel in my organization. Let me. So do you all see the link there to the webhook backend? All right, just give us a minute there to digest. For those of you just tuning in, thanks for listening on YouTube. This is the Kubernetes Office Hours, where we'll address your questions in the Hash Office-Hours channel on the Kubernetes Slack. So feel free to just whack your question in there, or you can tweet them to us. Just tweet them to @Kubernetes.io or @CastroJO, and I'm just following those there if you want to ask a question. In general, I'm just following every mention of Kubernetes on Twitter anyway, so we'll get to it. Any help for him here on this one?
So about the audit webhook, I assume it works like the admission webhook. So you have to create a controller, register your controller in the API, generate a certificate for your controller. So the Kube API will call on TLS endpoint. From there, you'll probably get JSON data that you can forward to Logstash, FluentD, FluentBit, whatever you are using. Should be JSON. So from there, if you push it to whatever login gesture that knows JSON, should work. But the setup should be exactly like the admission webhook, and that's documented on the internet.
All right, moving on. Let's see. Laith, welcome to Office Hours as Hi. I've had reports of master nodes becoming unresponsive on our cluster and the K8s API becoming unavailable, requiring manual intervention. Should master nodes reliably self-heal? Are there use cases where a single master node can become stuck in an unresponsive state? If so, do you suggest a particular way to monitor these nodes? So I would suppose whether it could heal or not would depend on what the problem is, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables there.
But why don't we talk about maybe how to investigate logs?
The best place to look at to start would be the logs, the API server logs, controller manager, the scheduler logs, and find the correlation when the outage happened, and if there's any evidence in the log files on any error message.
There's a useful tool actually from Apprenda called Kuberang that you might be able to set up. So we have this running in a cluster, and what it does is it schedules pods periodically. you can set it up to schedule pods periodically, and it tests a bunch of the like core Kubernetes sort of operation of the control plane. If you had that running in your cluster, like on the master node, and then could take a log every time it ran, you might be able to see what's going wrong, because it would either be like can't contact the API server, or the pods aren't scheduling, that kind of stuff. That might be worth looking into setting up.
Another way to monitor the Kube API will be to use a Prometheus exporter, and you can alert when the latency goes high. So you can do something before your Kube API gets stuck. Kube API metrics, I think, is the name of the exporter.
There's one called Kube State Metrics.
Kube State Metrics, yeah, that's one, yeah.
If you are looking to monitor the Kubernetes control plane, the CoreOS Prometheus operator has a bunch of really good alerts that they've set up for the API server, control manager, scheduler, that kind of stuff. So I would recommend going through the alert definitions that they've got in that repository.
I think if you can actually tell us a little bit more about like the manual intervention you're actually having to take, we can probably give you a bit more info on it.
Yeah, that would help us out. And then we popped a link to Kuberang. Is that a new one? I don't think we've covered that one before. And the Kube State Metrics. Moving on, are these ones that you're adding to the bottom here on the notes, Bob? Are these from users or Kubernetes users?
Jeff posted all those ones in, and they're from users. I've been going through and filtering them.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so if you get some follow-up on what exactly you're having to fix, it would probably help us out to help you, but we'll circle back around to you here. We have a question from Patrick. It says, hey there, I want to scrape endpoints of pods which are part of a deployment. All I can think of is using kubectl get deployment, deployment-o JSON to get the IP port. Is there a better way to do this? Or maybe I should rethink how my data flows. Do you want me to post the text in the, are you all in the notes document? I can also post it in Slack if you want.
So you want to discover I don't understand the question. Wants to discover all the ports that a pod exposes, or?
I think it's the pod endpoints, like the IPs.
Yep, and it looks like he just joined the channel, so let's give him a chance there to clarify. Welcome, Patrick, to the office hours. He says, no, not necessary. So he's typing. We'll go ahead and wait for him to type. So it feels like to get the IP, okay, so it says, I feel like kubectl's a hack. So it feels like, does he have to type that every single time he gets the IP/port, or are you looking for like a programmatic way to get the IP port?
There is always the API if you don't like kubectl.
Yes. Yes.
And if you're going for the IPs, you can also just get the pods and filter on the label that comes from the deployment.
Right. So generally speaking, do you recommend, if you find yourself kubectling a certain thing over and over again, at that point it's like, my tooling needs to talk to the API directly? Is there like a rule for this? What do people do? Do they generally keep a bunch of scripts that are kubectl stuff, or do they at some point make like a judgment call and say, okay, at this point we need to formalize pinging the API server and having like an actual
It looks like it's going to be programmatic. I can import the Kubernetes libs into my app.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that you can actually do, and this is how sort of service discovery happens in stateful sets, is you can create a headless service that targets your deployment with a selector. And then when you get that service, it will literally just spit back the pod IPs for all the endpoints.
Okay. Looks like
you just get the endpoints object that matches the right labels.
Yep.
Hmm. And
so different ways to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, that looks like probably what's he need. It looks like he's typing furiously. Bunch of people typing furiously. All right, Patrick, we'll give you a second to collect your thoughts, kind of think about what they said, and then ask. Keep giving us information, and we'll get back to you after this next question. Those of you that are joining us, we're answering questions live on Hash Office Hours. Ooh, it sounds like his question is answered. Bingo! Stick around, Patrick, for your chance to win a Kubernetes t-shirt. Those of you that ask your questions. Moving on to Dan B asks, is there a way to create a container inside a pod after the pod has been created, such that its life cycle is tied to the pod, i.e. when the pod is deleted, the container is terminated as well? I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to let an expert go.
So as far as I know, not really currently. There's some work being done with the being able to attach debug containers. If memory serves me correct, would go away as as soon as you exit the debug container. It's not meant to be permanently tied to the life cycle of the pod.
Okay.
At the moment, the pod spec is immutable, so you can't actually add containers to it. You might be able to, if you fancy going into the Docker CRI, add one manually, but I don't think Kubernetes offers an easy way to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say it was my understanding that it was designed like this on purpose. The pod is the lowest unit. Yeah, if I found myself manually adding stuff to the don't do that. That there's no way that can be right.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
You could add containers to the pod before it gets created automatically, right? With the webhook
controller, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the way to do it, not after it got there.
Yeah. And Dan, if you're listening, this feels like one of those things that if we knew your use case, we might be able to give you a best practice on why you wanted to do it that way. And maybe there's a better way to do that. Also, Patrick would like to remind us there's a 10-second delay from when we talk and he sees it on YouTube. So give him a chance to type more. But it sounds like we answered his questions. Lath has some follow-up. I will get to you in a second. Lath, please stand by. Isaac asks, how can I list my installed flex volume drivers? Standard location should be at user libexec/kubernetes/kubelet-plugin/volume/exec, but that directory does not exist. Meanwhile, I know we use NetApp flex volumes, but I'm not sure about the driver name. I need to know so I can put it into a pod security policy. That is an interesting question. Ooh, it looks like we have a new panelist. Hello, welcome, Matt Young. You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name is Matt. I'm starting a new role at the beginning of October. I was at Red Hat for a number of years and a bunch of places before that, working on OpenStack, and I'm going to be helping a startup that's not so small anymore break up a monolith and migrate from legacy AWS stuff to Kubernetes for their microservices. So I'm their new cloud architect. So I'm just kind of
hanging out.
Yeah, just putting a toe in the water. I don't actually start. I'm on vacation, but I've just been reading, and I'll lurk for a while.
For sure. Hey, what are the chances you know about flex volume drivers? Asking for a friend.
I will pretend I know nothing for now.
Okay. All right. We're gonna have to come back to this one. The way it works, if there's a question that we can't answer, we'll either send you to the SIG that knows it or repeat it again during the West Coast edition. So I will put West Coast edition on the notes here. Let's see. These other ones are coming from Kubernetes users, right? Not the channel, right? Okay. So I'm going to prioritize the questions in the office hours channels because they're actually hanging out. Let's see. Leif asks, he goes, okay. All right. Coming back to this one is the one with the master nodes becoming unresponsive. And Leif has to go in and do a manual intervention. And he says, shouldn't they auto heal? And then we said, well, it would help if we figure out what you were fixing. So he comes back, he goes, the incidents happened before I joined, so I don't have much information. All I know is that they stopped the node and it came back up. The folks didn't, I think that should be IT guys, didn't investigate the issue. I appreciate you don't have enough information to work with. I'll have a look at the tools you suggested in the meantime. I feel like I don't know, like I feel like can we talk about some best practices when you perhaps show up and you had someone else set up a cluster? Maybe talk about some of the due diligence that you would do, maybe give you, maybe we can give you some more information as far as what you would do. Because like I feel like the first thing I would do is like run like Kubernetes, see what the Sonobui results are. So that's we've got the notes, Matt. We have the notes in this HackMD file if you want to follow along. Kind of see what the Sonobui results are, and that will kind of tell you, oh no, there's like an RBAC. I just have this feeling that everyone's RBAC is always messed up. That's probably like the first, given the amount of questions we get, right?
Yeah. Really be looking at like how they actually provision the cluster, what CNI driver they're using, and it's a lot of the base foundational stuff really before diving into some of the other things.
Right. I do like to know if, I think especially life cycle, right? Like some people like to do in-place upgrades. Some people are sophisticated enough to just spot up new ones, move stuff over, kill the old one. But that sounds all magical. But some people do that. Is there anything else? Is there like a checklist of stuff?
I think I'd make sure I know where the etcd and the sort of control plane components are sort of set up. Like some people have them as static pods, some people have them as system D units. Then obviously there's the configuration for that as well. Like if there's any like special options that you might need to be aware of when you're debugging, that's kind of stuff.
Yeah. Is there such a thing as like a Sonobui for etcd? Is there like an etcd kind of
Not that I'm aware of.
thing? Does it generally just okay?
But you can generally get that etcd config really easily, and it's all command line flags.
Sweet. All right, so hopefully, Late, that'll give you a bunch of tools that you can investigate here. This Kubernetes I hadn't seen before. That's really interesting. I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, we've been running it for a few months. It's sort of, we've got it using prom run, so we can export a Prometheus metric of whether it passed or not. We can alert on that, so like we get paid sometimes when it's like Kubernetes failed. It's like, okay, the control plane's broken somehow. It doesn't give you too much detail from that, but when you actually look at the web page, it gives you, it's like, okay, pods didn't schedule on this node. Is there a problem with the node? Is there a problem with the scheduler? You can sort of narrow it down a bit.
Has it actually caught something that would have been bad?
Not yet, but as I say, we've only been running it a few months, and we don't get very many paging incidents at the moment. Our control plane just seems to be stable.
Yeah,
I don't know what more I can say about that.
Yeah, well, that's probably a good thing. Yeah, I don't know why I'm hoping it catches bad stuff. Hopefully, it's all boring and never returns anything. All right. Anybody else have any follow-up questions before we move to Kubernetes-users questions? I'm going to go ahead and just going to repost again. Talk amongst yourselves for a second. I'm just going to repost in the Kubernetes-users channel that we are live. Let me give you all a follow-up here. Hi, what's the meaning of the flag -- validate in the kubectl command? Feels like something that should be in a main page.
Should.
I think it's a historic thing, isn't it? Because kubectl used to do a lot of the validation of objects before it sent them to the API server, whereas I think now with the newer versions of Kubernetes, it's now sending directly to the API server, and the API server is doing the validation of the schema. I don't know if you can actually validate false anymore. Can you with like 1.11? I'm not sure.
I have no idea.
I remember them they've basically been moving a lot of the sort of client-side stuff from kubectl, taking it into the API server itself. Things like dry runs moving into the API server in 1.12. A lot of those flags are going to become just sort of, rather than actually kubectl logic, a query parameter on the API. So I don't think, don't know if validate will do anything anymore, because I would assume you'd want to validate it before it goes into etcd anyway.
Yes, so the validate flag does validation without calling the API. It's a client-side validation, but yeah, client-side validation doesn't really work. So maybe for simple YAML issues, but
YAML end.
Awesome. Eve C comes back, says, sorry, I got dragged away. No worries. But he meant GKE, and I basically said, we're stumped. Probably hash GKE might be a place for that one in specifically. All right, I'm going to move on to some Kubernetes-users questions. Those of you that are just joining us, feel free to drop your question in hash office-hours in the Kubernetes Slack, and we will get to it for your chance to win a t-shirt. All right, Derek asks, not sure if it's a Kubernetes issues or a Docker issue. I've run a Kubernetes cluster on a few bare metal servers for several weeks, but recently the master components will kill themselves, and even the related Docker images get removed. I tried to re-init the cluster with kubeadmin, but the problem's still the same. Anyone seen this kind of problem before? Thank you very much.
I can't say I've seen anything like that before.
That sounds very strange.
Yeah. Maybe if they're set to like Pixie boot and the thing reboots and everything's gone.
Yeah, like it sounds like an old backup's getting splatted on it or something.
Yeah.
Like,
I was wondering if something like Puppet was running on it and just latting the Docker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Derek, that sounds very not normal. Especially if like the local images get removed. It sounds like there's a job or some kind of automation somewhere that's showing up and killing stuff. But that's where I would start looking. Long says, I have a very embarrassing question. Don't worry, there are no embarrassing questions. Moving on to Ahmed asks, hello, I heard about vertical scaling in Kubernetes. I just want to make sure I got it right. Assuming I'm running Kubernetes on a cloud provider, can I just give it a job requiring, say, 12 gigabytes to run, and Kubernetes will auto-provision this machine and run the job on it? How magic is this? I'm adding that last part. How magic is this? Everyone's shaking their head no. Okay, so how does this actually work then with the vertical scaling?
The vertical pod autoscaler sort of monitors how much memory and CPU that a pod is using over time, and then when the pod gets restarted, it can mutate the pod to actually put more accurate requests in. So if you keep getting killed, for instance, it will start upping the memory request rather than you just having the same static request. It can also, over time, if it notices that you're under provisioning, kill pods and restart them and sort of set them lower. It's not for nodes. So if you want to bring up new nodes when you're running out of resource, you need the cluster autoscaler, but that doesn't have any sort of sense of what size nodes you need. You have to give that a bunch of like autoscaling groups and be like, yeah, choose from R4 larges or R4 XXX larges or something like that. It's more for pods than for the cluster itself.
Mm-hmm. And
there is a proposition to make the vertical autoscaler be able to mutate the limits without killing the pods. That will be more useful than what it does today, because when it needs to mutate something, it has to kill the pod, restart the pod, right? So let's say you want to increase the memory, have to kill your service, you'll get downtime because of that. Once it can mutate the limits without restarting the pod, that will be awesome. But increasing the vertical scaling the node, that's not Kubernetes issue. That's a cloud provider problem.
Yeah, almost too magical. I don't know. I don't want things that affect my build to be too magical, I guess. I don't know. That's just me. All right, moving on. Long asks, welcome back, Long. And I know you've showed up to previous sessions before. He goes, for people whose nodes use DHCP, is there an easy way to deal with auto-scaling group creating / deleting nodes often, or the existing node changing the IP address? I hear certificates going invalid after IP address is changed at least once per week.
And everything I've done has been with like static addresses, but you should be able to assign the certificate to the like host DNS name and not the IP address. So maybe like doing that instead will help resolve that issue.
All right. And
when I was going to say, when the API server talks to kubelet, it uses the host name rather than anything else. So if they nodes you're running have static host names, that should be fine. Yeah.
all right, and we know there's a delay. So Long, if you have any follow-up questions, yeah, I would be interested to know. So the best practice is pretty much use DNS names whenever you can. All right, so we'll wait for that. Moving on, Busada asks, hi, we're using Kubernetes on GKE. We have a long-running job/pod, but yesterday night, the autoscaler brought the node down. Any clue how to find the reason as to why it decided to remove the node and restart the pod/job?
And I take a look at the stack driver logs for the node itself, and it could just been like an automatic update or something like that for that.
Yeah, there are several reasons. One is you can set a time of the day when you want GKE to automatically update your nodes. So you should be careful setting that. Also, if you are using preemptible VMs, those VMs will get killed every 24 hours. And you cannot control that. They can also get killed faster. But I would say this was an automatically update. So you can control that with a maintenance window, I think it's called in the GKE interface.
Yep. And generally speaking, if you need something to stay long running in a job in a pod, how would they, I know you're not supposed to care too much whether a pod, lives or dies. It's all supposed to be dynamic and stuff. But in those cases where they prefer, is there a way they can cheat that a little bit? Or is that a bad practice? Because what I want to say is like, well, it shouldn't matter how long the pod is running or not, right? Ideally.
If you use a stateful set with a PVC or something like that, you should code your app when it starts up to resume from disk. Right. Even if the node goes away, when the node gets replaced, that volume gets reattached, creates a new pod, so you can resume state from there, or use something like a bucket or whatever to keep your state.
Yeah.
There is no way to avoid the maintenance window.
Yeah.
I don't know of any trick there.
Yeah. What I'm trying to get you to say is don't bet on hoping that a node won't restart, I guess is what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Can you all tell I just read the Kubernetes fundamentals book? I'm like, okay, I need to do that. But all right, good to know. Let's see. I see people typing in the channel. If you have questions, feel free to keep them going. We are wrapping up here in about 10 minutes or so. So no worries. We have a question. I don't know if you want to address this one in general. This sounds like a Bob question. Anyone using Kubernetes authorization authentication with LDAP? Do we want to talk about this real quick? I know there was just a TGIK on Dex, so we might want to talk about this a little.
There's lots of groups that are with a whole variety of options. Keycloak, Dex. There's lots of things out there that allow you to do this sort of stuff.
Yeah. So you're kind of using all of these or familiar with all of these. Let's say I was setting this up today. What am I leaning towards? Because I know one came from CoreOS, one's Red Hat, and then Red Hat back CoreOS. Like, are they merging those things? What's the TLDR? Which one? Are we still waiting to see what happens? Are they both going to stay maintained?
I think we're still waiting to see what happens. I can at least speak to Keycloak because that's what we use internally, and that's been rock solid for us. That's mostly because our LDAP structure is kind of whack, being a very, very large academic institution with many years of history shoved into LDAP that shouldn't be shoved in there.
I believe your employer invented LDAP.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Awesome.
and they don't adhere to the schema.
Yeah, that's good to know. Good to know. Okay, so Keycloak, Dex, lots of options still out there. Hopefully that will answer your question. AdFam asks, very novice question, but I'm trying to stand up a Minikube cluster inside an Ubuntu VM for development, but the kube DNS container doesn't seem to be able to reach the K8s API server. It's reaching out to the correct IP and port of the Kubernetes service, and the service is correctly pointing to the API server. Any ideas on where I should be looking next?
I think it might be worth to stand up a small real cluster instead of a Minikube cluster. Minikube has its limitations, and some things are not really working on Minikube while they can work on a real cluster.
If you have an Ubuntu VM, just you use kubeadm. There is no need for Minikube, right?
Let me just do a quick survey. How does everyone in the room do like their local development style? So do you just use kubeadmin in a VM, Stefan, when you need to fire something up?
Yeah, I have a physical mini server dedicated for that. Yes, it's an Ubuntu. It's a kubeadm. With
kubeadm, Bob?
Yeah.
I use Minikube for everything, but like now, since it essentially uses kubeadm for provisioning, like you can pass the kubeadm specific flags to it.
Right.
Yep. And Bob, can you paste in some of the LDAP tools into the channel there so people are interested? So we have.
Yeah, sure.
Nico, how do you do it?
I sometimes test on production or not, or just live cluster like preview or test cluster. But it's best to test on a live cluster. It's the most accurate result you can get, I guess.
Sure. Joel seems to be nodding.
Yeah, everyone in our team's got their own dedicated cluster that mirrors production, so you can test with a real cluster on AWS. It's maybe not the cheapest way to do development, but it gives good results, I think.
Matt, any opinions? You got a local thing?
I bought myself a Threadripper rig for Christmas, and so that's been my my plaything for OpenStack and more recently Kubernetes.
Yeah.
But I don't have enough stick time yet to have a qualified opinion
regarding
Kubernetes. I will take the kubeadm or kubeadmin tip though and play with that later.
Yeah, having your own bare metal sounds expensive, but then when you start to add up all the cloud things, so I bought a NUC, and I've been doing an Ubuntu VM with just raw kubeadmin, similar to Stefan, but the OpenSUSE folks have been lately integrating kubeadmin and supporting admin out of the box. So I'm actually trying their mini OS thing. So Richard Brown, if you're listening, I'm actually using it and playing it other than for streaming. So I'm really looking forward to see. It's really good to see distros starting to pick up kubeadmin and support it. It gives us like a nice common installation tool that we can use. So let's see, people asking for, let's see. Gongora asks, I have an AWS cluster in which I need to schedule pods on a master node. I've added taints to the master, and I was able to run a deployment with some pods in master, but when I created an associated service, AWS doesn't add the master instance to the ELB. I'm missing something besides the taint. Any ideas here? Would installation matter here, whether they use COPS or kubeadmin or?
Yeah, I don't know the AWS stuff that well.
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither.
Sorry, I was focusing on something else. I missed the question. What was it?
Yeah. I have an AWS cluster in which I needed to schedule pods on the master node. I have added taints to the master and was able to run a deployment with some pods in master, but when I created an associated service, AWS doesn't add the master instance to the ELB. I'm missing something besides the taint. So it sounds like stuff's getting scheduled. So you know.
Yeah,
this.
so AWS, you have so have you got master? If they've got master nodes in a separate autoscaling group, you need to make sure that autoscaling group is attached to the ELB. And by default, I don't think it will do that normally. So we've got our ELBs in front of both masters and workers, and you have to manually add those attachments to the autoscaling groups. I've not used the service type where it goes and creates load balancers. We've got an ingress controller and do that all ourselves. But I don't know. You need to make sure the autoscaling groups match up to where it's attaching the service load balancers.
All right, Gongora, please feel free to give us a follow-up. Hopefully that will help you. And he passes along, I wanted to thanks for these sessions, guys. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Patrick wants to add, I use kubeadmin, then switch to Minikube, then switch back to kubeadmin with Vagrant because I can do multi-node things. So that's one thing I like about kubeadmin is I can just add machines and it's like a real thing. It's not like, okay, now I have to redo the whole setup for real, you know? So that can be multiple VMs as one virtual cluster. And I know people like to do that with like KVM and stuff.
Quick, actually, Dex follow-up. It looks like it's been spun out on its own now.
Yeah, that's what I was just distracted by.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen any traction on that in a while. I've got a couple of PRs open to it, but I didn't see much activity. And then there's a new release like a week ago. I don't know who's maintaining it now because I know the original maintainer has left CoreOS, Eric Chang. So I don't know what's happening with that project. I'm hoping it carries on, but otherwise we'll have to change.
Yeah, I'm looking. So Dex IDP, is this a new company or did they just spin it out?
And it still has lots of references to CoreOS in there.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I'll keep an eye out, see what's happening there. But
it looks as though Eric's still maintaining it because he's merged a PR like 15 hours ago.
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
good news.
So good to know. All right, so we're starting to wrap up. We have time for maybe one question if anyone in the audience has one. We'll see. I'd like to thank everyone for listening in. And the last chance. All right. Do you have the t-shirt names? For chance, Bob?
Yes, I do.
All right. We are going to do the wrap. Let me do the outro first, then we'll do the raffle. So I'm going, just give us a second here to run this totally guaranteed to be random script.
I do not have the script. That's Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Let me
ask Jeff to get us the result. Unfortunately, Jeff's getting housework done, so he is not joining us. In the meantime, I'll start with the outro as soon as this loads. So real quick, while the raffle goes, thanks to the following companies for supporting the community with these developer volunteers. These sessions are run by volunteers from Giant Swarm, Heptio, StockX, Packet.net, Pusher.com, Red Hat, Weaveworks, VMware, Zing, hope I got that right, and the University of Michigan. Let's see, remember KubeCon is coming up here in December. We should be hearing about the sessions here pretty soon, actually. And for those of you that are contributing, the election will start today, probably when I send the email after this call. And with that, thanks, Aaron says, big thanks to the Office Hours panel, very helpful. Going to give all these options a go. Thanks, Aaron. We do this the third Wednesday of every month. Just keep on following on Twitter and stuff. And then I hop into the users channel every once in a while and remind everybody that we exist. And the winner of the t-shirt is
Gongora or
Gongora. Hold on, let me click and see if you have a real name. Marcel, you have won a t-shirt, so I will PM you after this and give you the code for the CNCF store. Oh wait, Bob's wearing the shirt. Stand up, Bob. This is the t-shirt that we give away. We give away a t-shirt every session that we have. And with that, thank you very much, and we'll see everybody out and enjoy Kubernetes.